My brothers and sisters, we're going to take a short deviation from our schedule this morning. We have a very, very knowledgeable person from the federal government, one of the highest ranking members in the DEA here. And I would like at this point to recognize Kent D. Gady, our National Director of the Elks Drug Awareness Program from Atlantic, Iowa Lodge number 445 for a very special introduction.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Grand Exalted Ruler Zelen, distinguished guests, and distinguished gentlemen sitting behind me. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you the Chief Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, Mr. Chuck Rosenberg.
Good morning, everyone. A great honor to be here. When they said that you had somebody very knowledgeable about to speak to you, I was looking around to see who that might be. Pretty sure they weren't referring to me. My name is Chuck Rosenberg, and I have the honor, the privilege of running the Drug Enforcement Administration. I've been a prosecutor almost my entire professional life, a federal prosecutor. And I come to the DEA from the FBI, but ironically enough, the one thing I didn't do as a prosecutor were narcotics cases. So that when I got to the DEA, I had a lot to learn. And I still feel that way. I've been the head of the DEA now for almost 2 years, although I have to admit to you, sometimes it feels a lot longer than that. But I want to share with you some of the things I've learned. And most important, I want to tell you how you can help and thank you. And that will all make sense, I hope, in a few moments. Let me tell you about some of the things I learned. Before I do, though, I'm going to also make one short deviation, if you don't mind, because there's a very special woman among us today. And it's a big crowd, and it's hard to see, but Mika Camarena is here, and you're going to hear from her later. Where is she? Mika, could you stand up? Mika's husband, Kiki Camarena, was a DEA special agent of the First Order. He was killed on February 7th, 1985 in Guadalajara, Mexico. I believe on his way to have lunch with you that day. He is a legend in the DEA, and we remember him every day, all the time, for what he did, because he's emblematic of the men and women of the DEA, the diligence, the devotion, the dedication, the passion they bring to a very difficult job. And we lost him in the line of duty. Mika will have the opportunity to say a few words later in this program, but I just wanted to thank her for being here and for the unbelievable sacrifice that she and her family have made in their lives. So thank you, Mika. So here's what I want to share with you. Here's what I want to share with you. Last year, 59,000 people died of a drug overdose. That is an absolutely stunning number. It's hard to imagine a number that big. I want to put it in context for you. Here's two other awful numbers. About 30,000 people die each year in a car accident. About 30,000 people die each year from gun violence. The number of people who died from a fatal drug overdose is the total of those two numbers. Here's another way to think about it. You all remember about a year ago we had that horrific shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, and 49 innocent people were killed. Now imagine that happening once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the evening for 365 days in a row. And that is still, I've done the math, you don't have to, that is still not 59,000 people a year. In our lexicon, I think sometimes we overuse certain words. We throw out words like unique or unprecedented or historic, and we don't actually mean it. There's a word, inflation, but we have an epidemic, and I don't believe I am misusing that word in the slightest. We have an epidemic in this country. 59,000 people died of a fatal drug overdose. And by the way, my sense of it is that that's an undercount in at least two ways. One is that some number of people overdose but don't die, thank goodness. Maybe because the first responder gets there in time and saves their life. But for that first responder, that awful figure, that 59,000, would be even higher. And a second way in which that's an undercount is that we know that we're not capturing all of these fatal overdose deaths through reporting from state and county coroners. But let's stick with the 59,000 and break it down a little bit, if you don't mind. 4 out of 5 heroin users in the United States start on prescription pills. 80% of heroin users, 4 out of 5, start on prescription pills. And we have about 600 new heroin users every single day in the United States. Take those two numbers, 4 out of 5 and 600, and set it aside for a minute, and I'll get back to it. Because here's some other numbers. As Americans, we're 5% of the world's population, and we consume 99% of the world's hydrocodone and 80% of the world's oxycodone. And so it's fair to ask yourself, how could something bad not happen? How could something bad not happen? All right, let's go back over here and get those other numbers. If you get addicted to prescription pills, and many people do, and it can happen very quickly, the cost of buying prescription pills on the street, on the black market, is extraordinarily high. Heroin is about 1/6 the price, maybe less. And so that's why 4 out of 5 heroin users start on prescription pills. And remember, 5% of the world's population, 99% of the world's hydrocodone. We have an epidemic on our hands. And so at the DEA, we think of it in several ways. Right? What can we do to address the problem? And how can you help? I mentioned to you before I was a federal prosecutor for many years. And whatever it was that I was prosecuting, whether it was bank fraud or crimes against children or counterterrorism, whatever it was I was doing, bank robbery, no, I shouldn't say it that way, I wasn't doing bank robbery, I was prosecuting it. But whatever it was I was prosecuting, I never thought we could prosecute or enforce our way out of that particular problem. And I feel that way about this epidemic. I don't think we can enforce or prosecute or incarcerate our way out of this epidemic, out of this problem, out of this social ill. We have to change the culture. We have to think about this problem in a different way. So it may be weird for the person who runs the DEA to tell you that enforcement alone is not sufficient. But enforcement alone is not sufficient. Having said that, the men and women of the DEA, the men and women like Kiki Camarena, do amazing work around the country and around the world. We have about 10,000 employees, about half of them are special agents. We have another 2,700 task force officers that sit with us in 220 offices in the US. We have 90 offices abroad. They do difficult and dangerous work, and they do it extraordinarily well. But if we're doing our enforcement work properly, then we're talking about high-level interdiction. The interdiction of drugs, and guns, and the violence that attends narcotics distribution at high levels, gangs and cartels. We have to hit that unholy alliance between international cartels and the violent street gangs that distribute this poison on our streets and work our way up. But the epidemic I described to you earlier is not here, it's here. It's at the user level. It's folks who are addicted. And here's where we have to change the culture and we have to change our thinking. And here's why I am so appreciative of the work that Kent Gade does, your drug awareness program, and all of your colleagues here, the Elks around the country. We have to change the thinking, we have to change the culture. So we do a couple of things at DEA that fall broadly under what I call demand reduction. We know that if you don't take drugs by the time you turn 25, if you haven't started it, the odds are almost zero that you will ever become addicted to anything. Right? If you make it to 25 and you haven't tried something that's really, really bad for you, the odds are you never will, and you will never become addicted. And so we know exactly who the target population is. We know exactly who we have to reach. We just don't know exactly how to do it. So we try lots of different things, and I want to describe a couple of them to you. And I think you'll immediately see that not just how you can help, because the Elks certainly can help, but how we need to think about this new paradigm. For instance, I had mentioned to you that 4 out of 5 heroin users start on prescription pills. I mentioned to you that we are 5% of the world's population and that we consume, one way or another, 99% of the world's hydrocodone. Where is all that stuff? Well, it's largely in your medicine cabinets. In medicine cabinets around the country are all kinds of things that can hurt people. Not intentionally, of course. Doctors prescribe this stuff so you'll feel better, not so that someone gets addicted and gets hurt. But there's stuff in your medicine cabinet that can hurt people. Because we also know that of those who get addicted to prescription pills, most of them, at least initially, get it from somebody who got it legitimately. So we have to clean out our medicine cabinets. Twice a year, the DEA sponsors a national drug take-back program. Anonymously and safely, anybody, anywhere in the United States can go to dea.gov, put their zip code into our website, and find a police station or a fire station or a community center where you can come and drop off whatever you have, and we will incinerate it for you. No questions asked, we don't read the labels, we don't start investigations, we just take it and we incinerate it. We've done 13 of these over the last 6.5 years. We did the last one in April, we'll do the next one in October. Let me give you some more numbers, at the risk of overloading you with numbers. The last take-back program we did, we partnered with 4,200 law enforcement agencies around the world at 5,500 sites. And here's the cool number. We took in 900,000 pounds of stuff. 900,000 pounds of stuff. We don't ask questions, so for all I know, people can be dropping off Bengay or toothpaste or old toasters. We'll take it. Doesn't matter. But we take it and we incinerate it. We get it out of the medicine cabinet and off the streets. Because every time we preclude somebody from getting addicted to pills, we're stopping them, in 4 out of 5 cases, from starting heroin, and probably from dying. Here are some of the trends we're seeing. You know heroin is dangerous. It's no surprise. It kills lots and lots of people. It's an opioid. It's highly addictive. But just as heroin is more accessible and less expensive than prescription pills on the black market, there's a new evil that's going to make heroin look relatively benign, and it's called fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's manufactured primarily in China. If you want to do the math, think of it this way. Heroin times 50 equals fentanyl. And because it's a synthetic, you don't have to grow it, you don't have to cultivate it, you don't have to harvest it. You just have to order it. And we know that dealers are lacing heroin with fentanyl, and people are dying every single day on the streets of our communities across this country. So we do our national take-back program. We clean out those medicine cabinets safely and anonymously. We're going to do it again in October. And so you're probably thinking, what can we do to help? You can help here. You can help a lot. You have 2,100 lodges. You have 1 million members. Help us get the word out about drug take-back. It's safe, it's effective, and it saves lives. What else do we do? Well, I told you that if you're drug-free by the time you reach 25, you're largely drug-free for the rest of your life. So the target population are kids. And the Elks know better than anyone how important it is to work with kids. I've seen the work you've done. I think I even have an Elroy the Elk in my office. We DEA partnered with Discovery Education. We built something free of charge, STEM-based, science, technology, education, and math, a STEM-based curricula, free of charge for every middle school and high school in the nation. And through OperationPrevention.com, any school, any parent, any teacher, any superintendent can access it and use it. We recognize that this is the population we need to get. And so you may be thinking again, how can I help? You're in every community in America. Let the schools in your neighborhoods know about OperationPrevention.com and about the fact that we have a free STEM-based curricula for the middle and high school students to teach the science of opioid addiction. We can save lives. Here's another way. With the FBI, the DEA produced a movie called Chasing the Dragon. I hope some of you have seen it. If you haven't, I'd urge you to do so. Chasing the Dragon is pretty brutal. What people chase, the dragon, is that elusive high, that next high, that high that's better than the previous one. Of course, with fentanyl and heroin, that high is going to kill you. Heroin is analogous to death. There's no such thing as good heroin. Heroin is death. And fentanyl is heroin times 50. Chasing the Dragon is a brutal movie. It's a brilliantly produced documentary. Before you show it in a school, watch it yourself because the language is a little bit rough. The language is not elk-like. But it's real and it's effective. And so that's another way in which I think you can help. I also worry, let me just mention this as a side note, about our first responders. Now, DEA, we are not typically first responders. If we're doing our work right, we're working high-level interdiction cases against violent gangs and violent cartels. But your first responders, your police, your sheriffs, your firefighters, your EMTs around the country are now encountering fentanyl in almost every overdose call they get. And here's what scares me, and what should scare you. Fentanyl is so lethal that accidental inhalation, accidental ingestion, even accidental absorption through your fingertips or through a cut can kill you. And so we have to rethink how our first responders interact. Not just with the folks whose lives they're trying to save, but in arrest scenarios and search scenarios. There was an example recently, I think it was last fall, of 11 officers who went into a house in Hartford, Connecticut with a search warrant. And the fentanyl that was lying around was aerosolized upon their entry, and all 11 ended up in an emergency room. None died, thank God, but they could have. One of our very own agents in the DEA did everything right. She had on gloves and a mask to handle the unknown powder in a particular case, but took off her gloves to handle the bad guy's telephone and actually absorbed fentanyl from the telephone through her fingertips. She's okay too. but thank goodness we had folks there to attend to her. First responders around the country are now carrying naloxone, sometimes known by its brand name of Narcan. It's an opioid inhibitor. It will save the life of somebody who's overdosed. In some cases, the fentanyl they're encountering on the streets is so powerful, so lethal, so potent, that they have to use 3, 4, 5 doses of Narcan to revive somebody. Oh, and by the way, I didn't even mention the worst news. Remember I said heroin times 50 equals fentanyl? We're now seeing something called carfentanil, even more potent than fentanyl. And that's what's in the stuff that our kids are putting into their bodies. We've got to change the culture. We're not going to enforce or incarcerate our way out of this mess. And so it's good men and women like you who can help us change the culture. I am so unbelievably grateful that the Elks have made this one of their priorities. I can't thank you enough, because this is an epidemic. We're losing 59,000 people a year. This is an epidemic. And so through our take-back, through your educational and outreach efforts, through your partnership with us in our 360 cities, through the work you do in your communities, you're going to make a difference. You already do. And I just very simply and humbly wanted to come here and say thank you for that. I actually asked Kent, sounds a little weird, if I could come and speak to you. And he said yes. And back in March, I didn't know that he'd actually take me up on the offer, but he did. And so I get to come here and say thank you to thousands of you for making a difference in your communities and helping to save lives. We have a big job at the DEA, and like I said earlier, I'm inordinately proud of our men and women. It's dangerous, it's difficult. Kiki Camarena remains an object lesson for us in how difficult and dangerous it can be. But we can take that, and you'll hear from Mika later, and we can build on that. He has not died in vain, because what he tried to do in Guadalajara, Mexico, what we try to do around the country and around the world lives on, and it lives on through people like you. So Kent, thank you for allowing me to come here and to speak. Thank you all for what you do. Help us. We need your help. We have to change the culture. We need to save lives. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rosenberg, for that impressive message. And I want you to rest assured that the Elks will continue to support your efforts on the battle against drug abuse. And I want to thank Kent and his associates for their continued efforts and diligence in promoting this fine program. Once again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenberg mentioned that he had an Elroy the Elk in his office. And you know, Elroy is nationwide, almost worldwide. We have a special award, the highest award that the Elks Drug Awareness Program bestows on any of our members, our citizens who help us a great deal. We've only given one of these awards to a person who is not an Elk. He is now becoming an Elk, and I've heard a big rumor that so is Mr. Rosenberg.
I don't know.
But on behalf of the Elks and the Elks Drug Awareness Program, Bill would like to present you with our Crystal Elk.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
Very good. Very good there. Right here.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mrs. Camarena will be speaking at 1:30 in room C1. You'll have a great time if you attend. Mr. Rosenberg, you asked me one time, Kent, can we get this done? And we talked about 360, and my response is, we have never let you down, and we never will. Correct?
Thank you. Thanks.